Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're undertaking something pretty unique and I think challenging.
Definitely challenging.
We're going deep into the foundational scriptures of Hinduism. This is a huge stack of ancient texts, the basis of faith for billions, but we're coming at them in a slightly different way. Not just as objects of worship, but as historical documents.
As layered documents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Layered with all sorts of political and theological agendas.
That's the core of it, right?
Yeah.
Our goal today is almost like a forensic study. We've pulled together Vedic hymns, the Upanishads, the famous Puranic stories.
And the alternative history.
And critically, yes, the alternative historical accounts from Sri Lanka, from the Siw Hela tradition.
But what we're doing is using what we're calling the tracing paper method.
Right.
We're overlaying these different timelines, these different sources, to spot where the original history might have been, well, literally rewritten.
Or modified, or just papered over with a completely new narrative that served a new purpose.
And our mission, really, is to equip you, the listener, with the tools to do this kind of multi-layered reading yourself.
Yeah.
We want you to see this whole body of work as a palimpsest.
A palimpsest. That's perfect. An ancient manuscript that's been scraped clean so something new could be written on top.
But if you look close enough,
If you angle it to the light just right.
you can still see the traces of the original ink, the hidden history that's sitting right there just underneath the official victorious narrative.
And that immediately brings us to the core paradox we have to tackle right up front.
Okay.
We have to draw a really clear line between what the most sacred texts say they are, pure divine eternal revelation, and what they were, in many cases, made to say.
The political narrative.
The political and theological narrative that was constructed by later editors, by dynasties really, to consolidate their power. Our job is to find the seams.
The scars.
The scars, yeah. The internal contradictions left by this whole process of textual layering over centuries.
And we are going to be tracking some monumental shifts in power today. I mean, we're talking about the demotion of powerful Vedic gods.
Huge gods.
The appropriation of their authority, even their signature color, by the gods who replaced them.
And then there's the geographical conflict. This is a big one.
It's a huge one. It involves redefining entire civilizations and maybe even relocating the spiritual heartlands of the subcontinent.
So this isn't just a study of religion.
No, not at all. It's a study of power, of narrative.
Yeah.
You could even say it's a study of ancient propaganda.
And to do that, to connect all these dots, we can't just jump into the edits. We have to set the baseline first.
Right.
We have to walk through the generally accepted chronological order of these texts. Because if we don't know the hierarchy, if we don't know the timeline,
then we can't spot the changes.
we can't spot the changes. We won't know where the updates, the political or theological patches were actually applied.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack this and get our chronological foundation really solid. If we're using these scriptures as a kind of timeline, what is the clear essential order? Let's move from the oldest, the foundational layer, the ultimate source code, you could say, all the way to the much later, more popular stories. Give us the chronology.
All right, the timeline is absolutely crucial here. It really shows this evolution from highly abstract ritual all the way to very concrete narrative-driven devotion. It starts with the oldest layer, the Vedic period. We're talking generally from around 1500 to 500 BCE, a huge span of time.
1,000 years.
And at the very root of that, you have the four Vedas. First and foremost, the Rig Veda.
The oldest.
The oldest and most fundamental. It's a collection of, I think, about 1,028 hymns. They're dedicated to deities like Agni, the fire god, Indra, the god of thunder and war, and very important for our discussion later, Varuna, the god of cosmic order.
Okay, so that's the Rig Veda. What are the other three?
Following that, you get the Samaveda, which is basically the Rig Veda set to music. It's chants for specific rituals. Then the Yajurveda, which is like the instruction manual. It's prose prayers, step-by-step guides for how to carry out these really complex sacrifices.
The liturgy.
Exactly. And finally, the Atharva Veda. It's a bit different, a little less focused on the grand rituals and more on the practical side of life medicine, charms, social stuff.
So those four collections, they're the original divine word, so to speak, and they're focused very heavily on these big public sacrifices and the physical presence of the gods.
Absolutely. It's very external. It's about the ritual.
So what structure then grows around these core texts?
The next layer is the Brahmanas and Aranyakas. These are still considered part of the big Vedic corpus, but they represent the first major layer of commentary.
So interpretation begins.
Interpretation begins. The Brahmanas are prose texts that just. They elaborate in excruciating detail on the rituals in the Vedas. They tell you the exact procedures, what materials you need, the metaphysical meaning behind every single tiny action in a ceremony.
So if the Vedas were the original instructions, the Brahmanas sound almost like the detailed, maybe even legalistic rule book that's meant to enforce a certain social order.
That is a perfect way to put it. The Brahmanas were absolutely instrumental in solidifying the power structure. They explicitly link specific rituals to the social hierarchy, the responsibilities of the four varnas or classes.
Ah, so this is where the caste structure starts getting formalized.
This is where it gets baked in. They assign specific ritual duties and privileges based on birth. It's a move from pure revelation to rigid societal enforcement.
And the Aranyakas?
The Aranyakas, the forest books, they came next. These were written by sages and teachers who retreated to the forest, and they shift the focus away from the big public external sacrifice.
Towards what?
Towards internal meditative understanding. They're really the intellectual bridge between the hardcore ritualism of the Brahmanas and the intense philosophy that comes next.
That transition sounds like the exact moment the spiritual journey shifted from what you do outside to what you understand inside. Which, of course, brings us to the Upanishads.
Exactly. And this leads us right into the Upanishadic period, which is roughly 800 to 400 BCE. The Upanishads are often called Vedanta.
Which literally means?
The end of the Veda, or, the climax of the Veda. And this is a radical philosophical break. The whole emphasis shifts almost completely away from external fire rituals and toward introspection, meditation, and achieving knowledge.
This is where we get the big idea.
This is where we get the core concepts that define not just later Hinduism, but Buddhism as well. Ideas like Brahman, the ultimate reality, Atman, the individual soul, the mechanics of karma, the cycle of reincarnation, samsara. This entire layer is almost a critique of the earlier ritual system.
So we've gone from hymns and detailed rituals to this deep, abstract philosophy, but most people, when they think of Hinduism today, they think of the incredible stories.
The epics.
The characters, the heroes, the grand narratives. When did they show up?
That happens next. In the post-Veda epics period, let's say roughly 400 BCE to 400 CE, this is the time of the Itihasas, the great epics.
The Mahabharata and the Ramayana.
Exactly. And these narratives were absolutely vital. They took the really abstract, high-level philosophy of the Upanishads and translated it into moral, relatable stories with heroes and villains. They successfully bridged that huge intellectual gap between the abstract Vedic religion and the more accessible classical Hinduism we know today.
And finally, we get to the layer that's really our focus today, as the source of so much of this rewriting. The Puranas.
Yes, the final layer, the Puranas. They belong to a very long Puranic period, starting around 300 CE and going on for centuries. These are massive encyclopedic texts.
Like the Shiva Puranas, the Vishnu Purana.
Those are the big ones. They give you these detailed genealogies of kings and gods, incredible legends, stories about the cosmos, and critically, they formalize devotional worship, or bhakti, centered on specific, often localized deities.
This is the period of consolidation.
Massive theological and geographical consolidation.
Yeah. Okay, this timeline makes the theological conflict almost inevitable. So now let's pivot to that crucial distinction in authority that drives this whole analysis. Śruti versus Smṛti. Can you clarify what these terms mean and why that distinction created the perfect environment for political rewriting?
It's fascinating. It's the institutionalization of a knowledge hierarchy. So Śruti, it literally translates to what is heard.
Okay, heard from who?
From the divine.
Yeah.
This refers to the Vedas and the Upanishads. They are held to be eternally true, divinely revealed, and therefore unquestionable. They are the ultimate, unchallengeable constitutional law of the tradition.
And Smṛti.
Smṛti means what is remembered. And this includes the epics, and most importantly for us, the Puranas.
So composed by humans.
Acknowledged to have been composed and compiled by human sages, even if they were divinely inspired. And their purpose was to popularize the teachings, the ethics, the specific devotional practices for the masses. They are officially subservient and secondary to Śruti.
And this is where that paradox's practice comes in.
Exactly.
Because the documents considered divinely unquestionable, the Vedas are often treated like a rarely cited constitutional preamble.
Right.
While the human-composed stories, the Smṛti, are what actually define the daily religious lives of most people.
That is the perfect summary of the practical gap.
Yeah.
Officially, the Vedas, Śruti, hold all the authority. Practically, the Puranas and the epics, Smṛti, dominate everything. Daily life, temple rituals, pilgrimages, the whole emotional core of bhakti.
And that gap, that disparity, that's the license for manipulation.
It's the license. Because the Puranas are technically secondary, editors felt empowered to update them, to expand them, or even to contradict the originals if it served a new, unified, or politically useful narrative.
But that raises a big question about governance and control. If the secondary texts contained things that fundamentally contradicted the primary texts, how did that contradiction just become accepted?
Through sheer popularity and narrative accessibility. I mean, the abstract nature of the Vedas makes them pretty inaccessible to the average person.
Sure.
The Puranas, on the other hand, gave people relatable gods, clear moral stories, emotional paths to salvation. They were just a much more effective tool for managing and synthesizing all these diverse local traditions under one big banner.
So the edits were successful because the stories were better.
They were more compelling. And the very fact that this massive conflict exists, where the later editions effectively overwrite the originals, that's what gave rise to reform movements.
Like the Arya Samaj movement you mentioned.
Exactly. The fact that the Arya Samaj was necessary in the 19th century, this movement that tried to reject the entire Puranic layer as later corrupt editions and return solely to the purity of the Vedas, that proves the point. It proves that the mainstream had recognized, consciously or not, that the Smṛti had aggressively drifted away from and basically superseded the Śruti. The edits worked.
Okay, so we've established that the Puranas are the perfect vehicle for these kinds of updates. Let's apply this analysis now to the Ramayana, which sits right on that fault line between the abstract Vedic world and the very concrete Puranic world.
Right.
We're not looking at the Rama-Ravana conflict as simple good versus evil. We're looking at it as a documented clash of shifting theological codes.
And the clearest signal the text gives us of this clash is through the demotion of the old Vedic establishment, the old gods.
Let's focus on that incident with Varuna. You said this one scene is often cited as the ultimate smoking gun, the evidence of a successful theological coup. So what was Varuna's original status in the Vedic hymns?
The Vedic Varuna is, he's arguably one of the most sublime and powerful deities in the whole pantheon. In the Rig Veda, he's not just some god of the ocean. He is the supreme keeper of Reda.
And Reda is?
It's the cosmic order. It's this impersonal, ethical, and physical law that governs everything in the universe. We're talking everything from the path of the sun in the sky to moral justice between people. Varuna is the independent sovereign, the ultimate ethical judge. Majestic. He bows to no one.
His character is about fundamental cosmic stability.
It is. He's the guardian of oaths, of promises. He's the bedrock.
So how does this majestic sovereign figure get treated when Rama, who is an avatar of the newly elevated Vishnu, meets him in the Ramayana?
Oh, it's a devastating reduction in status. It's really quite shocking. In the Valmiki Ramayana, specifically in the Udakanda, Sarga 21, Rama needs to cross the ocean to get to Lanka.
Right.
He asks Varuna, the ocean god, to grant him passage. When Varuna delays, which you could read as the resistance of the old order, Rama becomes enraged.
And this is where the character of the hero gets a little ambiguous. Rama, this supposed paragon of righteousness, does something pretty extreme.
Exactly. He threatens to unleash a powerful destructive arrow, a Brahmastra, and essentially dry up and destroy the entire ocean.
Wow.
He threatens to commit this cosmic act of environmental destruction just because Varuna won't immediately cooperate with his personal political agenda.
Wait a minute. If Radha is the cosmic order and Varuna is its supreme keeper,
then Rama is threatening the keeper of the cosmic order itself.
so how does Varuna respond to this threat? Does he stand his ground?
Not at all. He appears immediately, but he doesn't show up as a sovereign peer. He appears as a terrified supplicant. The text describes him with folded hands, trembling, literally begging for mercy from Rama. A figure who, in the original Vedic hierarchy, is technically far beneath him.
He gives him what he wants.
He humbly offers a solution. He tells Rama how to build the bridge, the Setu, across his domain. He completely capitulates.
This scene, then, is clearly not just a plot point. It's a huge theological statement. What is the fundamental implication of a mortal avatar terrifying the keeper of cosmic order into submission?
The implication is profound. This whole scene symbolizes the overthrow of the old order, the one based on Rida. The impersonal, ethical, universal law that Varuna represents is being replaced by the personal, human-centered duty or dharma of the avatar, Rama.
The rules have changed.
The highest cosmic rule must now submit to the demands, the political necessity of the new hero, even if those demands involve destroying the planet. The spiritual authority has successfully been passed from the old Vedic gods to the new Puranic avatars.
If the text is willing to demote its own gods just to elevate its hero, then we have to turn that same critical eye to the central conflict itself.
We have to.
The claim is that Ravana's label as purely evil is deeply tied to the needs of this new narrative, and it contrasts sharply with the ethical ambiguity we just saw in Rama's actions.
Well, when you look at the conflict without that Puranic filter, it stops being a simple story of light versus darkness. It becomes a geopolitical confrontation framed by shifting definitions of honor.
Okay, so what was the inciting incident?
The war was not started by Ravana attacking Ayodhya out of the blue. It began with an aggressive act from Rama's side. Lakshmana mutilated Surpanaka, Ravana's sister. He cut off her nose and ears in this incredibly humiliating display.
So Ravana's immediate action abducting Sita wasn't an act of random chaos. It was a political countermove.
To avenge familial honor, yes. Under the older warrior codes, which put a huge premium on protecting your kin and avenging that kind of profound dishonor, Ravana's abduction, while, monstrous by our modern ethical standards, was a calculated political response. He took the wife of the aggressor's brother to make a point about honor.
And that nuance gets completely lost when he's just labeled a man-eating monster.
Completely erased.
Yeah.
But let's look closer at the hero's actions. What's the specific incident that traditional scholars have the most trouble justifying in terms of Rama's adherence to the warrior code?
The killing of Vali.
The killing of Vali, the Vanara king. Rama killed Vali from behind, hiding behind a tree, while Vali was already in a one-on-one duel with his own brother, Sugriva.
That's a clear violation of the foundational Kshatriya warrior code. Combat is supposed to be fair and face-to-face.
It is an explicit, undeniable violation, and the text itself knows this. It struggles. It tries to justify it in a few ways. It says, well, Vali was already weakened, or Vali had committed a previous sin by stealing his brother's wife.
Or the ultimate justification.
The ultimate one. That divinity is above rules, and that reliance on divinities above rules perfectly showcases the narrative construction. The writers had to ensure Rama's victory, even if it meant he had to break the very dharma he was supposed to embody.
The goal was the victory of the narrative.
Not the consistency of the ethics. The end justified the means.
Okay, let's move to another piece of this construction. The theological necessity of the Hanuman as Shiva claim. You called this a fabrication, a patch to cover a plot hole. Walk us through why this edit was so necessary.
The dilemma for the Vaishnavite agenda here was massive. Ravana wasn't just some random king. He was a renowned scholar, a master musician, and most importantly, the single greatest devotee of Shiva.
Right. He received incredible boons from Shiva.
Extraordinary boons. The Chandraha's sword, divine protection. He was virtually invincible against any power known to the gods, thanks to Shiva's blessing.
So if Ravana is protected by Shiva, the supreme god, how could a mere mortal or even a Vishnu avatar defeat him without making Shiva look either weak or, worse, complicit?
They were in a bind. The narrative couldn't allow Shiva to stand against Rama. That would position the huge Shaivite population against this emerging Puranic story. But they also couldn't just diminish Shiva's power by saying his boons didn't matter.
So what was the fix?
The fix was to neutralize Shiva by claiming he was secretly on Rama's side all along. The later Puranas and other texts introduced the claim that Hanuman, who was traditionally known as the son of the wind god, Vayu, were actually a Rudra avatar.
An incarnation of Shiva himself.
An incarnation of Shiva. And this is a very late addition. It's notably absent from the core Valmiki text.
So this theological patch justifies Shiva's involvement on Rama's side.
It does. It lets Ravana be defeated while simultaneously saving Shiva's honor.
But it serves another purpose too, doesn't it?
It serves a dual purpose, and this is the more important one for our analysis. It subtly ensures that Shiva, the rival supreme god of the Shaiva tradition, is now functionally subservient to Rama, the Vishnu avatar.
He's forced to fight undercover in Rama's army.
Exactly. And that is foundational for establishing Vaishnava supremacy over Shaivism. It's a point we're going to circle back to because it contains a massive logical flaw that reveals the whole game.
We've seen the theological rewriting. Now we have to address the geopolitical motivation behind it.
Yeah.
We're moving to the pretty controversial hypothesis that this whole narrative rewrite was essential to demonize a perceived threat.
A physical and ideological threat.
The prosperous, sophisticated island civilization of ancient Sri Lanka, or the Siw Hela. So the conflict here isn't just God versus demon, it's meritocracy versus a caste system.
This moves the whole conflict from the heavens down to earth. We're looking at a direct ideological confrontation between the Siw Hela model, which valued knowledge and function, and the Smṛti model of the mainland, which was increasingly relying on a birth-based caste hierarchy, the Varna system.
So let's introduce that Siw Hela framework, the 4 tribes, Yaksha, Naga, Raksha, and Deva from the Sri Lankan perspective. How did the structure challenge the Varna system?
Well, in the post-Vedic period on the mainland, the caste system was getting more and more rigid. It was birth-based. Your social standing, your profession, it was all predetermined.
And mobility was limited.
Severely. The Siw Hela model, on the other hand, seems to have operated very differently. It was a federation of 4 major tribes, and they were distinguished by their function, not by any inherent superiority of blood.
Tell us what were the functions?
The Yaksha were the cultivators and administrators. The Naga were the navigators and traders masters of the sea. The Deva were associated with spiritual and medicinal knowledge. And the Raksha. They were the specialized protection and defense guild.
And they coexisted as equals.
As relative equals within this federation. They intermarried, they worked together.
So the term Raksha tribe wasn't a species of demon, it was an occupational title.
Precisely. The word Raksha means to protect. They were the high-level defensive strategists, the guardians of the cities. And this functional meritocracy posed an existential threat to the caste system. Imagine you're an observer from the mainland, from this rigid system. You look over and you see a unified, prosperous, technologically advanced society where people succeed based on their knowledge and their skill, not on who their parents were.
The message would be, their system works better?
Exactly. The whole ideological foundation of the mainland relied on keeping these social classes distinct, separated, and controlled by birth. The Siw Hela model, where a man could transcend his tribe by mastering knowledge, challenged that control at its very core.
So the conflict was a fight to maintain social order through stratification.
It was. It had to be framed as a holy war to preserve that order.
This new perspective, then, it radically redefines Ravana. He's infamous for his 10 heads. The claim we're exploring is that these weren't physical heads at all. They were symbolic.
They were symbolic, yes.
So what do the 10 heads, the deses, represent in the Hela tradition?
They represent his immense intellectual capacity. His mastery of the 10 Vidyas, or 10 sciences. He wasn't just a king, he was a polymath. We're talking about a mastery of Ayurveda, medicine, Jyotisha, which is astronomy and astrology, warfare, statecraft, music. He's credited with inventing an early string instrument, the Ravanahatha, and several other fields.
So the 10 heads are a symbol of his knowledge capital.
And in being so, he completely transcended the restrictions of Varna. Ravana was born a Brahmin. His father was the sage Vishrava. But he was the most learned man around, so a Brahmin by knowledge. And he was the most powerful warrior and king, a Kshatriya by deed.
He broke the caste rules by being everything at once.
He was the ultimate, highly successful man of merit. And to the rigid orthodoxy on the mainland that valued birth above all else, a figure who achieved ultimate power through sheer knowledge, who challenged the prescribed order.
He must be demonized.
He had to be. He wasn't just an enemy. He was an ideological anomaly. He had to be rewritten as a terrifying, uncontrollable monster to prevent anyone else from aspiring to that kind of multifaceted meritocracy.
Let's talk about the political utility of this propaganda campaign. The transformation of the Raksha, the protectors, into man-eating demons must have been an incredibly effective tool to justify an invasion.
It was an ancient masterclass in disinformation. I mean, if you're an aggressor and you want to invade a prosperous, settled land like Lanka, you can't tell your people, we are invading to subjugate a wealthy, advanced rival who runs a meritocracy.
No, that wouldn't work.
You have to dehumanize the enemy. And by flipping the meaning of Raksha from to protect to devour, you turn city guards and defense strategists into mindless man-eating cannibals.
And that immediately gives you the moral mandate you need.
The moral mandate is, we're invading to eradicate evil and save civilization.
It turns an act of war, a territorial conquest, into a holy crusade.
Exactly. And what's amazing is that the cultural memory is so stubborn, it's resistant to this labeling. We still see evidence of the original meaning today. If you look at the use of Raksha masks in modern Sri Lankan rituals, things like the Garayaka or the Nagaraksha, they aren't figures of chaos to be feared.
What are they used for?
They're still used for protection, for healing, for warding off the evil eye. The culture itself retains the memory of them as protectors, even as these foreign narratives insist they were monsters.
All right, let's move to the visual and functional forensic evidence that seems to confirm this power shift. We're going to look specifically at how attributes, including the color blue, were literally stolen from Varuna and transferred to the ascending deity Vishnu. You called this the blue heist.
It's a great name for it, because this visual appropriation is one of the clearest fingerprints of the whole editorial process. It's such an effective way to visually declare that cosmic power has been transferred.
We established that Varuna, the Vedic sovereign, was the god of the sky and the cosmic ocean. So why was his complexion traditionally described as dark or blue?
Because the color blue, in that Vedic context, it symbolized the vast, the mysterious, the profound aspects of existence.
The deep ocean, the infinite sky.
Exactly. Varuna's complexion was dark blue, Nila Meghashyama, the color of a dark rain cloud. It symbolized his control over the cosmic waters and the mysterious depth of Rada, of that cosmic order.
Now let's go back to Vishnu in the Rig Veda. What was his primary nature and what color was he associated with?
Vishnu in the Rig Veda is he's a relatively minor deity. He's predominantly a solar deity. He's associated with light, with action, with movement.
His great feat is the three strides.
The three strides, the Trivikrama, measuring the three worlds. So he's consistently associated with gold or white or solar radiance. He is definitively not blue in the foundational texts.
But when Vishnu gets elevated in the Puranas to become the supreme preserver, he suddenly takes on this blue hue. How does that constitute theft?
It's a strategic appropriation. It's a hostile takeover. As Vishnu took over Varuna's function maintaining cosmic order, replacing Rada with his dharma, he also needed to take Varuna's uniform.
So the blue skin is the uniform.
By being depicted with blue skin, Vishnu visually absorbed the vastness, the depth, and the ancient authority that had always been associated with Varuna. The color provided this silent, visual signal to devotees that the power of the old sovereign had passed completely to the new sovereign.
And he also, as you noted earlier, literally moved into Varuna's cosmic residence, the ocean.
He took his job, his color, and his house. It's a complete theological identity theft.
And that brings us to an equally powerful example of this, the Naga appropriation.
The cobra bed.
Vishnu's cobra bed. This is an iconic image, but you're saying it's also a symbol of geopolitical conquest.
It is. The Puranic image of Vishnu sleeping on the king of the Nagas, Anantashesha, is iconic today. But this image is completely, totally absent from the Vedic texts.
So why is the snake Anantashesha such a potent political symbol?
Because the Nagas were one of the four powerful indigenous Siw Hela tribes. They were particularly dominant in maritime trade and culture across South India and Sri Lanka. They weren't just snake worshippers, they were a major political and cultural force. So this depiction, Vishnu reclining on Anantashesha, it's not just about him being comfortable. It is profound political symbolism. It visually declares that the powerful indigenous Naga culture, the masters of the ocean and the land, have been utterly subdued by the imported power of Vishnu.
That's a strong analogy. It's almost like a modern conqueror using the flag of the conquered kingdom as a carpet.
That's a perfect analogy. It's a clear declaration of hierarchy.
A visual statement of dominance.
By making the king of Nagas a mere bed, a cushion for Vishnu, the narrative establishes that indigenous power is functionally, theologically, and physically subservient. The image is an enduring statement that this ancient, regional, earth-centered power must now support and facilitate the imported celestial supreme authority. The conquest is baked right into the iconography.
Let's ground this identity theft in Sri Lankan history with the local guardian deity, Uphold. He's almost universally equated with Vishnu today, but the local records seem to suggest a very different origin.
The case of Uphold is a textbook example of cultural forced blending. And again, the name, the etymology, is crucial. Uphold means the one with the complexion of the blue lily.
Blue again.
Blue again. It inherently links him to aquatic forces, which perfectly fits the guardian of an island nation. It's Varuna's domain, the protector of the ocean.
And the ultimate proof that he was not originally Vishnu lies in the ancient hierarchy described in the chronicles. What is the evidence from the Mahavamsa?
The Mahavamsa, the great chronicle of Sri Lanka, it details the scene of the Buddha's final passing, his parinibbana. The Buddha entrusts the protection of the island of Lanka to Saka, who is the equivalent of Indra.
Okay.
But, and this is crucial, Saka then delegates the duty of protecting the island to Uphold.
And that's a hierarchical contradiction.
It's a contradiction that cannot be explained if Uphold was Vishnu. Vishnu is the supreme preserver. He is vastly superior in status to Indra or Saka. A supreme god does not take delegated orders from a lesser deity.
So Uphold must have been an indigenous deity or the Vedic Varuna, a peer of Indra.
But not the supreme Vishnu. It's logically impossible within that framework.
So when did this identity swap, this merger, become complete in Sri Lanka?
It took centuries, but it really accelerated dramatically during the Polonnaruwa era, around the 11th to 13th century CE. This was a period of intense South Indian influence, of aggressive Vaishnavism.
And it was a political move.
It was a necessary move for cultural synthesis and political control. To assimilate the island into the broader mainland theological framework, the powerful local blue god of Polvan was formally conflated with the ascending foreign blue god, Vishnu. It allowed the new theology to appeal to the local population while simultaneously asserting its supremacy over the existing local guardian structure.
We've established the theological demotion and the identity theft. Now we move to perhaps the most controversial part of this deep dive, the claim that the Buddha's life events and scriptural locales align better with ancient Sri Lanka than with North India. We're going to use linguistics and environmental science to back this up.
This is where the earth itself starts to testify. We're looking at specific, quantifiable evidence that suggests a fundamental geographical displacement happened in the narrative.
Why? To what end?
Likely to centralize the spiritual geography on the mainland after the conquest was complete.
Let's go back to the Yakas. Using a Buddhist text, the Alawaka Sutta, how does the text itself internally refute that later label of demon or spirit?
The evidence of Alawaka's humanity is just. It's overwhelming if you read the text literally. Spirits and demons, in a metaphysical sense, they don't run governments.
Right.
Alawaka, the Yaka leader, is specifically mentioned in the sutta to have wives and to preside over a functioning home or palace, a bhavana. This proves he was a settled, powerful tribal king or a political leader ruling a real, definable territory.
And his interaction with the Buddha isn't an exorcism?
Not at all. It's a profound intellectual exchange, a philosophical summit. Alawaka engages the Buddha in these deep, complex questions about ethics, about wealth, wisdom, how to achieve peace. These are not the questions of a mindless, man-eating brute.
These are the questions of a highly learned scholar king.
Exactly. The text itself presents him as a sophisticated philosophical peer, even if he's a bit antagonistic at first.
So the sheer volume of the Buddha's interactions with Yakas and Nagas suggests he was operating where they were.
The frequency and the nature of those interactions suggest he was operating primarily in territory dominated by these sophisticated tribes, which historical sources place in ancient Sri Lanka and the southern regions.
And we have to reiterate the linguistic distortion here.
We do. Yaka derives from the root yaj, which means to worship. So it means a venerable one or worshipful being. The later editorial impulse needed to twist the venerable one into a terrifying demon to justify their subjugation.
Okay, let's move to the environmental forensics, the Saltree anomaly. The traditional texts give very specific descriptions of the plants and the climate around the Buddha's open-air birth in Lumbini. What is the fatal flaw with the Saltree, Sharia robusta, in the currently accepted Himalayan location in Nepal?
The textual descriptions are very clear. The Buddha was born in a lush, fully blooming, warm environment. It had to be, for an open-air birth. And the texts specifically identify the Saltree as being in full flower at the time.
And the problem is the climate?
The climate clash is undeniable. The Himalayan foothills, where the traditional Lumbini site is, they have a continental climate. They are too cool, too harsh, especially in the early spring, for the prolific, lush growth of the Sharia robusta to perfectly match those descriptions. The current site just doesn't fit the botanical and climatic profile.
And how does that contrast with the proposed Sri Lankan location?
Sri Lanka, specifically the area around Theldonaya or Bambaragala, which is identified by some as the ancient city Chita, is perfectly suited.
Why?
Because the Saltree is a tropical hardwood. It thrives only in that warm, humid, tropical climate. The presence of ancient, prolific sal groves in that area provides an ecological match that the Himalayan foothills simply cannot replicate.
Trees don't lie.
Trees do not lie about the climate they need to flower prolifically. The botany supports the idea that the location described in the text was far more tropical than the traditional northern site.
And the final piece of this geographical puzzle is the linguistics, the continuity of the Hela language in the names of sacred Buddhist sites. How does the local dialect act as a kind of original template for the sacred geography?
The linguistic evidence can reveal the original geographically grounded names that were later slightly modified to fit the new mainland geography.
Give us an example.
Okay, consider the site of the Buddha's first sermon. The traditionally accepted site is Isipatthana in Sarnath, North India.
Right.
If we look at the Hela description of the location for that event, it is Isin Basagala. The linguistic parallel is, it's too striking to be accidental.
Let's break down the Hela name.
Isin Basagala literally translates from the Hela dialect. Isin means sages, Basa means descended or landed, and Gala means rock or fortress.
The rock where the sages descended.
Exactly. Now look at Isipathana. Isi means sage, Pathana means landed or fallen. Both names describe the exact same event, the arrival of the wise ones. But Basagala preserves the local linguistic pieces, suggesting the event actually occurred in the location where that language was the native tongue.
And this pattern is repeated.
It's repeated across the sacred geography. Even the word Lumbini, the traditional birthplace, is traced by some linguists to a Hela word, suggesting the site was associated with royal gardens in that proposed Sri Lankan region. The original linguistic map suggests the entire sacred circuit of the Buddha's life was centered in the tropical, Hela-speaking territories.
Let's circle back in depth to the most illogical and, as you put it, theologically insulting contradiction we identified earlier, the claim that Hanuman is Shiva.
Right.
For those who revere Shiva or Sadashiva, this Puranic patch isn't just illogical. It's an act of deep theological disrespect designed for a political power play.
It forces us to confront the logical consistency of the Puranic editors. If we just grant the premise for a moment that Hanuman is Shiva, the Rudra avatar, then we find two major flaws that fundamentally violate the nature and majesty of the Supreme Lord Shiva.
Which forces us to conclude
that the equation is a fabrication used for external political purposes.
Okay, the first contradiction involves the physical humiliation of Hanuman during the Lanka War. If Hanuman is the Supreme Shiva, what does the incident where Ravana's mortal Raksha soldiers capture him actually imply?
The contradiction is blatant. Shiva is the ultimate Ishvara, the Supreme Lord. He cannot be bound or harmed by mortal or even semi-divine forces. The scene where Ravana's soldiers are able to bind Hanuman, parade him through the streets, and critically set fire to his tail.
It implies they were able to torture the Supreme God.
It implies they inflicted physical torture and humiliation upon the Supreme God incarnate. It's an absurdity. It reduces the all-powerful, unassailable Ishvara to a captive who suffers physical pain and ridicule at the hands of those who are cosmically subservient to him.
It's a profound theological reduction.
Required only by the narrative needs of Rama's war, not by the actual nature of Sadashiva.
And then there's the second paradox. The paradox of betrayal concerning Ravana, the ultimate devotee.
The betrayal is perhaps the worst part. Ravana earned his powerful boons. He earned the Chandraha's sword directly through his intense devotion to Shiva. Shiva's power and his commitment to his devotees are core tenets of Shaivism.
So if Shiva then incarnates as Hanuman to help kill his own devotee,
he becomes a traitor, a deceitful god who violated his own promise and his own boon.
That's a huge charge.
But it's the logical conclusion. The fundamental nature of Sadashiva is that he is eternally unchanging, he's aloof from these petty conflicts, and he is completely reliable in fulfilling his word. To suggest he would engage in a deceitful double-agent operation, accepting Ravana's worship with one hand while plotting his death as Vanara with the other, is the ultimate insult.
And it shows the extent to which the Vaishnavite agenda needed to co-opt Shiva.
Even if it meant sacrificing his moral and theological integrity to do it.
So, if the logical inconsistencies regarding Shiva's nature are so glaring, the only remaining reason for this theological manipulation must be political.
It has to be.
The establishment of Vaishnava supremacy over the Shaivite tradition.
This is the core political move. It's what we call the servant trap. Contrast the two roles. Shiva is the Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, worshipped for his ultimate sovereignty and independence. Hanuman, conversely, is the ideal dasa, the servant. He's defined entirely by his humility, his obedience, and his dedication to his master, Rama.
So, by equating the two,
the Vaishnavite authors solve the centuries-long rivalry. By enforcing the equation, Hanuman is Shiva, the authors simultaneously honor the powerful Shaivite tradition while subordinating it.
What's the political message being sent?
The message sent to the massive population of Shiva devotees is chillingly clear. Even your supreme god, Shiva, exists only in a role of a devoted, obedient servant, a dasa, to our god Rama. This move achieved two critical goals for the editors. It secured Rama's victory over Ravana, and it legitimized Vishnu's position as the hierarchical supreme god, effectively placing the highest Shaiva deity permanently below the Vishnu avatar in the cosmic pecking order.
It's the ultimate act of theological manipulation to ensure a political structure of belief.
It is.
So a careful reader must conclude that rejecting the Hanuman is Shiva fabrication is necessary to restore the true dignity of Sadashiva as the supreme, unchanging being who honors his word and remains sovereign.
Indeed, it allows us to view the conflict not as a simple cosmic battle between good and evil, but as a political confrontation where the spiritual texts themselves became the weapons in a fight for geopolitical and theological control.
This entire deep dive has been a powerful reminder that history, especially sacred history, is so often written, edited, and even weaponized by the victors to serve their purpose.
What we've really uncovered is this pervasive, centuries-long process of colonization and centralization. We've seen an older, knowledge-based societal structure, the Siw Hela meritocracy and the ethical order of Varuna's Reda, aggressively overwritten by a newer, centralized structure defined by the Puranic Dharma and Vishnu's supremacy.
So our key takeaway for you, the learner, is to recognize the text as a palimpsest. Every time you engage with these profound narratives, you have to consciously read the layers.
You have the foundational Vedic layer, the philosophical Upanishadic layer, and then finally the political narrative layer of the Puranas.
And learning to spot the contradictions, the trembling Varuna, the humiliated Shiva, the scholarly Ravana, that's the key to historical literacy.
And this process, it's not about rejecting these traditions, not at all. It's about achieving a far more comprehensive, multi-layered reading of spiritual history. It allows you to appreciate the complexity of how belief systems evolve under intense political pressure.
So what does this all mean for the history that remains hidden?
Well, if the texts were so aggressively edited to recenter the entire spiritual and geographical narrative on the mainland, to demote the old Vedic gods, and to completely demonize this sophisticated island civilization.
Turning learned tribes into monsters.
Turning the Yaka and Raksha tribes into monsters and their polymath king into an uncontrollable demon. Then we have to ask ourselves, what crucial knowledge, what unique spiritual lineages, or what vast geographical history was erased simply because the original speakers were labeled as enemies of the new ascending power structure?
What knowledge was lost simply because the original speakers were labeled monsters?
Exactly. What else don't we know?
A profound thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.